What's going on, guys? Running it back with our final part of the Beastmen roster breakdown. Getting into the monsters and beasts, there's a lot to like here. I did cover some of the lower tier stuff like the hounds, harpies, and razor gore herd already. Just because they're pseudo cavalry or cavalry adjacent type of tools, I wanted to just talk about the actual like beasts and monstrous infantry in this video. So we'll move into them now. We can start off with the Manticore here. Manticores, they're pretty reasonable. An 800 gold monster that gives easy access to terror is never really a bad thing. They do rampage. That's probably the biggest drawback to them. And when you flip over and take a look at them, 5,100 HP, not the most in the world, but still fairly solid. 2,000 mass, pretty reasonable. They can push in and out of fights okay. Really, though, what you use the Feral Manticore for is in matchups like against the Dowie or factions that have really strong flyers like Tzeentch, where they've got the Changebringers. Situations like that, or where there might be vulnerable lords to attack, like the Greenskins. And who else? Who's got lords that a Manticore can take that you see reasonably often? Honestly, Chaos Dwarves not a terrible place for Manticores. The shooting can be really scary, but they can actually do some good damage to the Bale Tauruses. Surprisingly, they do uptrade into them reasonably well. And I don't know, they're just solid. They're not tremendous monsters by any means. They're very matchup dependent. Their leadership is kind of low, and the feral rage, of course, is pretty unappealing. But good micro can get you a lot of value out of this 800 gold unit. That's really the selling point of it. Moving on to the Cockatrice. This is something that I've been experimenting with a little bit. It's honestly pretty strong. It's not quite a core unit, but the effects that it has and its snare ability are incredible on the Beastmen roster. This thing is available for the Warriors of Chaos, but I don't think it's all that great on the Warriors of Chaos roster. Just because the Warriors of Chaos can't quite follow up with it in the same way that the Beastmen can. The Beastmen being so quick and having so many good skirmish units, as well as decent SE support, really means that the Cockatrice, which has reasonably good holding power on the field, can get in there, do a bunch of work for you, and just lock stuff down. I mean, it's got Petrifying Gaze here, 32-second snare. It's got 4 stages here, 25%, 50%, 75%, and then complete immobility, each with, 8 seconds apiece. Really nice. Also causes terror. Has better missile resistance than the Feral Manticore, actually. And just better stats overall. Outside of the charge bonus, you just get a straight upgrade. Like, more melee attack, more melee defense, a lot more AP. The AP split on the Manticore is not bad for something that isn't a majority AP, but Cockatrice gets a full 150 over this beastie here. Overshield's awesome, and it's got 1,000 plus more HP. What's not to like, honestly? It does have less mass, so it can get stuck. It does also have some funky animations. I have seen this thing bug out at times, which is a little annoying, where it just, it's fighting something that has similar mass to it, and then it just can't move. I don't know what the deal is with that, but you can just give it an attack order on that unit again, and it'll actually keep fighting. So, if you notice, you gotta pay a little bit of attention to these things. If you notice it doing some weird stuff on the ground, just make sure it's fighting so you get some value out of it. It's pretty damn good. It is 1100, of course. It's starting to get a little pricey, but with some reasonable micro and some support to make use out of the snare, it can definitely uptrade for you pretty quickly. It is honestly much better in a variety of matchups than the Manticore, which is really why I have it so high up on the list. You won't be bringing it all the time. You could very viably do so, honestly. I can't really think of any matchups where it would be terrible. Like, even against a faction like Wood Elves, where it wouldn't be stupendous. It can fly around, it can, like, lock down one of these Wild Riders, or beat up on a Lord, and get you some value that way. The extra missile resist is nice. And Terror is just so strong, dude. Beastmen have a surprising amount of terror for pretty cheap. I mean, you got the Manticores, you got Cockatrices, you got their other monsters too, a lot of whom are honestly fairly affordable and provide that terror bonus. With how quick Beastmen units are, you can follow up and just absolutely ice enemies' units before they can either make it to safety and rally, or wreck them as they're terror routing. Just like run them down with Centigores, do a bunch of damage, and then actually fully route that unit. Chaos Spawn. I've been thinking about these guys a lot. Oh, God, dude. I think they're highly niche. They really do get outclassed by your other options in the on the Beastmen roster. But arguably, they're one of the stronger Spawn variants, funnily enough. I mean, this really goes to show that Spawn are in a pretty mediocre place right now. None of the variants are all that good. They all can function in the right circumstances and in the right matchups, though. Like, one matchup where I think the Chaos Spawn are really good is against Slaanesh and also Nurgle. The Unbreakable's really nice in those matchups, as well as the fact that these guys have poison and good weapon strength against lots of low-armored units. They're very annoying to get rid of, and they pair up really well with some of the other big monsters that you can bring. Just don't bring them too often. You know, they have no armor. I mean, 10 armor is nothing. These guys get absolutely wrecked by missiles of any type. And lots of factions do love to play around their archers and crossbows, handguns, stuff like that. Chaos Spawn fall off pretty hard at the range level. If your opponent is going to be going for a kite style, and these guys are pretty slow, but if you can get them in a position where they're supporting something and your opponent has to engage onto them, they can do a lot of damage. They're really good stacked up on top of infantry, where their weapon strength and poison can really help out. Say like a Zangor, or heck, a Korngor is a really good pairing with these guys. You know, the Chaos Spawn actually clear out chaff infantry pretty well, which the Korngors can struggle against in large numbers. And the Korngors can kill large targets that can do good damage to the Chaos Spawn. Poison, of course, slowing stuff down. Really, really nice tar pit unit. Comes with a lot of caveats and drawbacks, though, which is why they're in the highly niche category. They're definitely not a bad unit. Not at all. Just very, very, very situational. Like, way more so than even a Manticore is. Okay, guys. Let's get into some of the Monstrous Infantry now. We'd already talked about the first one here in the Chaos Spawn, but the Minotaurs. The Minotaurs, kind of the bread and butter poster boys for the Beastmen. They all have a place in the roster, I think. But just starting off with the dual weapon variant, strong but situational unit. There's not a ton of differentiation between all of the Minotaur variants. They're all reasonably, they're all the same cost, like the standard variants are. The ROR is a different story, but in terms of like melee attack and charge bonus, all pretty much the same across the board. The shield variant is a little different. We'll talk about that in a second, but just to get into the dual weapons for real this time. 32 melee defense, 34 melee attack, 62 speed, way quicker than the Khorne variant, but they do have a lot less armor. Khorne's Minotaurs actually have a lot of armor. 70 is pretty juicy. These guys have 35, which is pretty flimsy. They can definitely get poked out at range, which can really hurt, and that is an area the Beastmen are already weak in. You really bring the dual weapon Minotaur if you're going to be expecting a Chaos Warrior rush of some type, or just a bunch of heavily armored infantry. Which means that a lot of matchups, they're really not that great. Not good against Tomb Kings, definitely not good against Wood Elves. Vampire Coast, they're weak in. Kislev, they're pretty bad in. Really, like, Dowie, Chaos Dwarves, the Mono-God factions, maybe not Nurgle, but, like, Slaanesh, they're pretty good against. Warriors of Chaos, they're really strong against, just because Warriors of Chaos are always bringing, either Warriors or Forsaken in some form. It's very rare that you see Warriors of Chaos players not bring those units, not to mention Aspiring Champions, who are very popular now. Pretty good against Tzeentch. A little vulnerable to the missile fire in this matchup, though. So just gotta be really careful with these guys. They're deceptively micro-intensive. Lots of people just throw Minotaurs into the front line, expect them to just, like, outright kill everything they touch, or hold a lot longer than they really can. They can fall apart really quickly to spears and missiles, as I've been saying. So you gotta look after them and keep them in a position where they can really make use of their solid charge bonus, rack up a bunch of kills to get Blood Greed nice and charged, and just leave them to do their business, man. All right, the Great Weapon variant, strong. Not quite an auto-include. Pretty damn close, though. Just big damage potential. All the things that make Khorne Great Weapons good makes these really strong. Arguably, these might be a little better than the Khorne Great Weapons. Just because they're 100 gold cheaper. They're faster, so they don't get kited out as easily. Like, Khorne Minotaurs can be kited around because they only have 56 speed. 62, it's not that big of a difference, but it does help. And makes it a little bit less likely that these guys get left behind by a cavalry unit that just disengages from them. Especially with the cavalry changes recently, with the mobility increase to cavalry across the board. Minotaur Great Weapons, as long as they're not getting charged by stuff that can really hit against their light armor, are just an amazing unit. They're amazing against single entities. That's really what the Minotaur Great Weapons are here for. You've got plenty of other heavy cavalry killers with your Centaurs and Razorgore herd. Minotaur Great Weapons are really like a multi-model anti-SE type of unit. Arguably, though, like just a regular old Gorbel may be a little bit better overall. Because you can bring double Gorbel for less than the price of Minotaurs. Because, you know, Gorbel is 1050. Give them Slaughter's Call, and it's the same price. Now, you can do Gorbel and a Minotaur Great Weapon, and that's a pretty good combo. Because they synergize really well together. I mean, they're, you know, like the same unit, so why not throw them in together? You know, like the Gorbel can take a charge from a unit, And then the Minotaurs can pile in and peel stuff off of them. There's lots of cool little combos you can do with Beastmen units to really make them shine. Minotaur great weapons have just a ton of damage potential, man. Good bonus versus large. Reasonably quick. Very vulnerable at range again, but same with the rest of the roster, you can say. And I generally find them to uptrade pretty easily. Just better on the whole than the anti-infantry dual weapon variant, just because the Beastmen have plenty of infantry clear. You know, you don't really need the dual weapons all that much. But the Minotaur great weapons are still strong, don't get me wrong. That's why the dual weapon variant is still pretty high up here. Shields are okay. The shielded Minotaurs have really high melee defense, actually. At 45, which is pretty crazy. For a monster's infantry unit, there's really not a lot that can equal that total. So if you need them to run around and just pile into combat and be some solid armor-piercing damage, sitting on top of infantry, they can definitely do that and profit pretty immensely. They can't fight alone too much, but just with a little bit of support. All they need is like an Ungor spear underneath them, and these Minotaurs would be just fine. Blood Greed is nice, of course. They've got a good charge bonus. They can cycle charge pretty effectively, and they've got a silver shield, so if your opponent's bringing a bunch of missiles and you're worried about that, but still want the mass and punching power that a Minotaur unit has to offer you, these guys can fill that niche on a budget and do pretty nicely for you. Nothing too spectacular, though. They're a little disappointing in the damage output department. They're just not, like, the most dangerous unit in terms of their actual DPS. But you can bring them out and, you know, people really like to shoot big stuff. Like, anytime you bring monstrous infantry out of any type, people will usually start to swap their missiles to firing away at units like this. So you can throw these guys out on the field, and your opponent might not realize their missiles are not hitting very efficiently against them. And you can waste a bunch of ammunition, get in under all that bow fire, and really start to go to town. And give time for you to develop out some other units like Centaurs, and your infantry can move in. Stuff like that is pretty nice. Finally, we're going to get to the Butchers of Kalkengard. God, dude. What is there to say about this unit? They're definitely a core unit. They're just insane. Honestly, one of the best units in the game. They've got regeneration, which is awesome. So they are a little vulnerable to fire damage. So there are some matchups where they're a little bit less available than others. But they've got crazy high leadership at 85. I mean, not going to be breaking at any point in a battle unless they just get absolutely railroaded by something. You can see in a head-to-head comparison against the regular Minotaur shields, they've got 56 melee defense. Super tanky in melee combat, man. Very hard to kill these guys. They've got 43 melee attacks, so their damage output is just getting into the range of being a real threat. And since they heal so much, they can always pull out and get lots of cycle charges off, with the silver shield helping them out in the survivability department at range. Blood Greed getting their melee attack up more with the terror routes that they can cause. They just snowball really hard. If your opponent doesn't have an answer for them, these guys can absolutely take over a match. And there are matchups where they're just an absolute bully of a unit. Like Greenskins have like no answers for the Butchers of Kalkengard. Like mass missile fire can only do so much, and the terror routes just ruin Greenskin leadership. They're pretty good against Warriors of Chaos, okay against the Lizardmen. Really good against the High Elves, actually. You might think, oh, well, High Elves have tons of spears, like, and lots of missiles, and they've got stuff like the Fireborn, right? Well, the Fireborn are actually pretty easily countered by Centaurs and the Razorgore herd and the Butchers of Kalkengard. Something that a lot of people don't really clock about the High Elves is that, yeah, their leadership is really high, but they don't really have a lot of immune to psychology units, right? And the Beastmen, very good at getting flank charges off, so if the Butchers of Kalkengard can, like, pile into a unit that you've already got engaged from the rear, it's a pretty free tear route in those matchups, and you just send stuff fleeing for their lives with absolutely no hope of rallying before they get killed. Good against Dark Elves. Matchups that are bad are really just the Chaos Dwarves. Chaos Dwarves just have so much fire damage. They're not that good against Slaanesh, because Slaanesh has ITP across the board, as well as lots of good anti-large units, so that matchup's not great. Not that good against Kislev, but pretty much anything and everything else, they're like either okay or just outright dominant in. Don't leave home without these guys, honestly. They're one of the best starter Beastmen units. As a newer person getting into the Beastmen, you should honestly almost always have these guys in your army. Just get used to using them and figure out the strengths and weaknesses of them. Do be careful, they'll give you a little bit of a skewed idea of what Minotaurs can be good at, just because they're so much more durable than the standard variants, but, you know, why wouldn't you want to play with an elite ROR with this much, like, power scaling? Alright. Now we're getting into the big beasties. And we're starting off with Giants. Giants are just not a good unit, unfortunately. They're lumbering and slow. They don't have healing. They don't synergize with this roster very well. Their melee defense is awful with mediocre armor. They got a ton of HP and are basically unbreakable with 100 leadership. Good melee attack also in Cause Terror. Good weapon strength. That's really about where it ends, though. I really feel like Giants would be an okay unit if they got up to like 45 speed. Like, it just doesn't make any sense why these guys are so freaking slow. Like, oh, okay, they're this lumbering monstrosity, but they're tall as hell. They're taking these massive strides. They feel deliberately nerfed on the speed front, a little unfairly in my opinion. I'd just love to see them get a little bit more speed, and I think Giants would be a pretty reasonable unit. They're cheap at 1,400, which is nice. That's really about the only other kind thing I have to say about them. Giants can work in other rosters, like factions that have rampages or lots of healing can use Giants a little bit, but the Beastmen really just don't synergize with these guys. And I don't know. Independent of healing and more support, they're just okay, like, at best. And that's just, you know, not worth it for the Beastmen. They've got better options elsewhere for fighting big stuff as well, which is like the one thing Giants do pretty good, is use their weapon strength to like beat down SEs. But there are other SEs in here that the Beastmen can utilize to accomplish a lot of the same stuff. Cygors. Pretty cool unit. I mean, the standard one, not all that good, truth be told. You know, 1,550 gold isn't super expensive for like an artillery piece. They do have Soul Eater, which raises miscast chance on the entire map 50%. They've got some spell resistance. They cause terror. But, you know, not a ton of armor. Leadership is mediocre at 75. It's like good for a single entity, but it can get broken and run away. I mean, if you look at it honestly, just in a comparison to the Giant, it's really not that dissimilar in a lot of ways. Lose a bunch of weapon strength and melee attack, but it gains its missile, and the missile is strong as hell. If these things are actually hitting targets, Cygors are nasty, dude. They mulch heavily armored infantry. That's why it's in the highly niche category. You know, Beastmen have other options against heavy infantry, like Razorgore chariots and stuff like that. But the Cygor, being able to anchor points and also throw these boulders in can cause a lot of problems for a lot of factions. They're deceptively hard to counter, and they got a ton of health. You know, you compare this to like a Death Shriek rocket. You know, Death Shriek rocket basically dies if you lock in a melee combat. It's got no defensive stats whatsoever, and the Cygor isn't amazing on the defensive, but it's got double the health. I mean, a lot more melee attack and melee defense, even if it's not like the most in the world. It hits pretty hard with its 470 weapon strength, with most of that being AP, by the way. So, you know, you can get it in there and get some good value out of it, given the right circumstances. They are limited to 2, and of course, we will be talking about the far superior variant. And we'll just go ahead and jump into that right now. So the standard Cygor is pretty niche, you know, but the Eye of Moorsleep is a core unit. I'm going to go out on a limb and say this thing is actually just straight up meta for the Beastmen. And we can talk about why. It's 350 gold more expensive than a standard Cygor. Still has pretty weak melee defense, but it gets a good bit more melee attack plus extra leadership, so it's almost unbreakable. It's very hard to rout this thing off. It's got magic attacks, which means that it's very good at defending itself against just about anything. Magic damage on the boulders is really nice also, and it fires a lot faster. Like a full 3-second reduction on the reload time for the ROR. 12.3 seconds as opposed to every 15 seconds for the Cygor. Plus having Warp Gaze, 3 snares and a 100-meter radius around this thing can make Beastman boxes unstoppable. This thing is just a brutal beastie to run into. It easily gets its value back with its boulders. It can miss like 8 or 9 boulders and still get 1900 value for you. Combined with the fact that it hits so hard in melee combat, plus all the snare value, and the Beastmen love being able to snare stuff down and countercharge it. Gods, is it strong. It's a hard carry piece. It is so good at countering mobile factions, as well as countering heavy infantry. So, like, this monster is a nightmare for Slaanesh. It is so good against Slaanesh. It's wild. Beastmen have a pretty awful matchup here, but the Eye of Moorsleep by itself, with the snares, with the boulders, actually probably brings it back to being fairly winnable for the Beastmen. Without this thing, it's probably 70-30 in favor of Slaanesh. With the Eye of Moorsleep, though, it's probably closer to a 60-40 in terms of advantage for Slaanesh. Which is pretty awesome. So, like, if you're in an SFT and your opponent is going Slaanesh, just bring the Eye of Moorsleep every day. Don't think about it. Get it in your army. Pop some Warp Gazes, punish those mobile units. Toss boulders at all the heavy infantry, and just laugh. It's even good at killing chaff, man. Like, it does so much damage with the boulder that hitting like 400 gold infantry really isn't that big of a deal for it, because then it can like walk in and terror out those units if it really needs to. It also draws a lot of aggro. Because it does so much damage, people are going to be trying to, like, shut it down and dive on top of it oftentimes, and since it is basically an artillery piece and Beastmen are able to swarm really effectively and they love countercharging stuff, if your opponent blobs up around the Eye of Moor's Sleep, you can punish them so freaking hard. You've got, like, Traderkins to, like, pop on single entities. You've got Flock of Doom and Enfeebling Foe for, like, cavalry and infantry. Lots of stuff you can do to protect this monster. Just amazing. I don't, the only matchups where it's going to be, like, outright not good would be maybe, yeah, like the Empire. The Empire, Tomb Kings, Vampire Counts, probably not very good against Vampire Counts. Although, nah, yeah, so factions with just, like, tons of artillery, who don't typically bring a lot of heavily armored infantry, are factions where it's not that good. Skaven are another one. But against any of the demonic factions, pretty much, amazing. Even Tzeentch, you know, like, Tzeentch has lots of range tools. They can deal with the Eye of Moor's Sleep, but the Eye of Moor's Sleep can use its snares on something like the Changebringers, and then you pop a bunch of Ungor Raiders out from behind the Eye of Moor's Sleep and just rip them to pieces. Plus, you got Cockatrices now that can support the protection of the Eye of Moor's Sleep in that matchup. Good against the Warriors of Chaos. Probably at its best against Warriors of Chaos. Because Warriors of Chaos love to bring Hellstriders, but also armored infantry. So, just like the Slaanesh matchup, it helps even that up. And arguably does even better because Warriors of Chaos don't have Pavane outside of Azazel. And Azazel is not really all that good against this guy. Just because Azazel can be fairly squishy. And the big weapon strength on this bad boy can really just dap him up badly. Vampire Co is probably another weak matchup, but it's good into all of the other, like, good factions, basically. It's like an anti-meta unit in a way, which is just really fun, you know? Who doesn't love to see a Cygor also? It's a crowd pleaser. It's an outright good unit. Synergizes with the strengths of your faction really well just because of the warp gazes. And protects you against probably the thing that you're weakest against, which is armor checks. You know, like, just shit tons of armored infantry can be really tough. Because, yeah, you've got lots of anti-armor units, but if there's just so much armor on the field that your infantry are struggling and getting cleared, it can be really bad for you. And the Eye of Moor's Sleep, being able to pound away at range, can really force factions with all this heavy infantry to engage on your terms. Which is really where you want slow builds to be. Which is at your mercy and at a mobility disadvantage, which the Eye of Moor's Sleep can compound on. While also focusing on weakening those very expensive armored infantry units that can give the Beastmen so many problems. Alright, enough about Big Boy there. We'll get into the rest of the units now. We've got a fair number to get through. Stay tuned. Get some popcorn. I'm a little split on Jabberslythes. They're a good unit, for sure. I do think that they're probably just situational, though. Honestly, I feel like Jabberslythes are really good into the undead factions. Undead, honestly, are kind of bad at killing high-mass units. Plus, the fact that Aura of Madness only procs when leadership is lower than 50% of base. And you know, it's in a fairly restricted radius. It's really good for punishing those kinds of blobs that the undead really like to go for. Spurting bile blood can also do some good damage to like low armor infantry like zombies and you know, skeleton warriors and stuff like that. It is a cycle charge monster. Like, if you really want to clear out infantry, you want to use its collision attacks, which are pretty amazing. I mean, this thing will just blunder over things. It's really funny the way it, like, interacts on the charge. It's just such a clumsy-looking monster, but it does so much more damage upon, like, further examination. Despite its really low charge bonus, a nightmare for infantry-type units. Magical attacks and poison are really nice. Also decent against a lot of demons, but demons are fairly high leadership. You know, really the collision damage is what you bring the Jabberslife for in those matchups. But solid overall. Not the best thing in the world. Causes terror. It's only 1900 or 1700, even better. 1700 as opposed to 1900. And can really smack stuff around and be a really annoying unit to have to try and lock down. It's fast too. 65 speed is really quick for big monsters, truth be told. There's not a lot in the same category as it. Just for the kind of profile that it fits and the kind of units that it's good at fighting. Reasonable against single entities as well. Not like the strongest thing in the world in those matchups. Here, let me show it off. I just realized I hadn't actually showed its stats off. So here's the Searing Bile Blood that I was talking about. It procs all the time. It's on a really short cooldown. Imbues the poison, obviously, and just does some decent damage in a radius around it. Aura of Madness is like a smallish Mortis engine. Honestly, I'd like to see it maybe get buffed up just to like 12, 24 damage per second. I think that would be a small increase that's worth it. It can struggle to get its value back, but like I said, low leadership factions are where the Jabberslife really shines. So Skaven is a good matchup. Vampire Count's pretty good. Not so good against Vampire Coast. Greenskins, it's pretty good against. And, I mean, that's really about it. But those matchups, it being good there and being a good mix-up tool really ain't bad. Also, maybe Ogre Kingdoms, now that I think about it. For terror routing, the Noblars. So Ogre Kingdoms players love Noblars. They're also pretty lightly armored. Spurting Bile Blood might do some damage to Ogre Bulls. That's something I'll have to test. But, like, keep an eye out for the matchups that I just highlighted. Because I've used Jabberslives in all of them and really not ever been fully let down by them. At the very least, even if they don't get their full value back, they've got a good amount of HP at 9200. Their disruptive attack animations just send them flying all over the place. They're very hard to accurately shoot because of that. They're a deceptively good distraction tool. Oh, Tomb Kings are another matchup where they're good. They stop up Cetra pretty well because they've got the same amount of mass. They're good against all of the infantry, obviously. Like, Tomb King infantry outside of the Kefir Guard have, like, no armor. Can do good damage there. Just keep it away from Sepulchral Stalkers and Ushabti Greatbows, and it'll do really good for you. Alright. Let's swap back. And let's just go ahead and talk about the ROR variant. Probably in the same boat. Navorba Broodmother is reasonably strong. Again, it's like the same type of... it does a lot of the same things that the regular Jabberslife does, with a few notable key differences. Better stats, leadership obviously is an ROR. It is 400 gold more, which is a big premium to pay. It's got the same Aura of Madness, still causes terror, But its Vortex is Searing Bile Blood, which sunders armor and does a shit ton of AP damage. 2-second duration, 10-meter radius, procs every 15 seconds, does 8 damage per second. All AP, so really good against heavy armor. The only reason I wouldn't put it higher up is it's, still got the same weaknesses that the standard Jabberslythe does. And I think the Eye of Morsley may just be a little bit better at the anti-armor roll. But the Sundering is nice. This thing running through the front line can just imbue the sundered armor on whatever it's hitting, which helps your Goreherd and Zangors and pretty much any of your infantry and Centigors and stuff do some really good damage, thanks to lowering armor by 30, which is a pretty substantial amount. Definitely a good little debuff there, but it's fairly situational. Probably, on the whole, a little weaker than the standard Jabberslythe, actually. Usually, RORs are a straight upgrade, but I think this particular monster, while still being about as good in terms of its damage output, on a cost efficiency scale, is just a little bit overpriced for what it provides. It's really just like a different flavor and niche Jabberslythe unit. And the niche it fills is pretty well covered by other options. One of which is the Incarnate Elemental. The Incarnate Elemental is a really strong monster, man. It's 1900 gold, fairly expensive. Its leadership is 70, so it's a little less than the Jabberslythe, actually. But its Incarnate Flock is active at all times, as long as this thing is above 25% health. By the time it gets down to 25%, it's crumbling out anyways, usually. So, that's really not that big of an issue. You just, throw this thing up and just let it, grind away on top of your own infantry, killing any stuff that, gets into contact with it. It's fairly quick, 60 speed. It is a little lumbering and slow to turn, which is annoying. It's not got any crazy animations like the Jabberslythe, so it is a lot more vulnerable to shooting. Despite being, similarly statted when it comes to speed. Animations are low-key a very underappreciated element to what makes units good in this game. That's one of the things that lets this thing down, but it's good at trampling over stuff. It causes terror. It's got Strider, which Jabberslythe doesn't have. So it's good at fighting in forests, and honestly, if there's a map where you've got a forest position that you want to throw this up into, and there's a couple of maps like that where it can get on the opponent's side of the field and just sit with Ungors and Goreherd, and be protected by missiles that way, and just flock everything down and control a lot of space by being really annoying and present in some very inopportune places. It's also got Howl of the Great Beast. It's a pretty good little debuff. Lowers leadership and speed for 25 seconds and a good radius around it. The leadership can be really nice to synergize with its terror-causing element. It does have some Fizz Res, so a little bit of missile resistance from most sources. Can definitely help keep it alive, but shouldn't be relied on too much, as well as some spell resistance. Solid overall. A little bit easier to use than the Jabberslythe. Just because Jabberslythe are so micro-intensive, as opposed to the Incarnate Elemental, which isn't nearly as micro-intensive. You do want it to be fighting, or at least within range of frontline fights most of the time. While a Jabberslythe you really want to use to charge in and out to maximize its collision damage. And the Aura of Madness and the Spurting Bile Blood are a little bit more of just a whatchamacallit, a little cherry on top. And the Incarnate Elemental is just there for more direct, long-term Mortis Engineering type damage. Gorgons. I don't know, dude. I don't think Gorgons are in a very good spot right now. I'll just go ahead and put both of these here. They're not terrible units. And in fact, I mean, I think the Bloodbrute Behemoth is actually really strong on the Khorne roster. But we'll just talk about the standard Gorgons real quick. I'll talk about why I don't think they're all that good. Or at least why I don't think they're that good for the Beastmen. Like, Beastmen just have really good anti-large already. They've already got Minotaurs. They've got Gorbals, who are, like, way cheaper SEs that can do pretty much the same thing. And are also fairly disruptive, have good HP pools. A Gorgon is pretty low armor, pretty lumbering. They're reasonably fast. They've got low melee defense. Really, you bring them for strength from flesh, which did get nerfed a while back. It's still really good, don't get me wrong. Do have to be in melee for it. These things are very vulnerable at range. They can get kited out really badly. You do have lots of answers to that from the Beastmen, but I just feel like it being a 2,000 gold anti-large monster, it's just a little lost here in terms of, like, what you really want to do with it, because you just got other things that you can bring. It's not bad, don't get me wrong. I'm only putting it highly niche, because if you do bring it, you do need to game plan around it a lot. You really need stuff to, like, properly protect against ranged tools. You need to bring something that can force your opponent into a prolonged fight against the Gorgon. Most people just try and walk away their big monsters and cavalry from this thing and just tar pit it in infantry, where they can poke it down because it has really low melee defense. Strength from flesh is there to help it a bit, but it's just not that amazing at making use of strength from flesh, honestly. It's very vulnerable. Very, very vulnerable, and its animations are not that disruptive and, like, wild, like the Vorbagland and the Jabberslythe. So, I gotta put it down a little lower because of that. The Bloodbrute Behemoth is just a better Gorgon. It gets, like, no extra melee defense, but it gets a bunch more melee attacks, 69. Very nice. A little bit more armor, gets the spell resistance, and it is 550 gold more, which is a big premium to pay for a Regiment of Renown. It's fine. It's fine. I think Khorne is arguably a little bit more in need of something like this than the Beastmen are. I mean, Beastmen just having, like, you know, Traderkin and Ungor Raiders and throwing axes and Gorbals. They've got, I mean, they like in Minotaurs, not to forget about a unit we already talked about that's really good at anti-large single entity dueling. You just got so many other tools that can do the job of the Gorgons, so I just don't bring them, really. I might play around with them a little bit more, but every time I've brought Gorgons in the past, I've just been like, it's so expensive. I could have brought some other units, stuff that's a little easier to synergize around, doesn't skew your build so horrendously. I think that it could shine in I think the matchups where they would be really good is Ogre Kingdoms for obvious reasons. Okay against Khorne. That's really about it, man. I mean, Greenskins have too many missiles. Chaos Dowie have too many missiles. I mean, what are you going to do against the Dowie? Maybe, Bretonia. Bretonia struggles to kill Gorgons. That might be the one matchup where they're truly good. God, dude. I've had quite a few games with Bloodbrute Behemoth for the Beastmen and for Khorne where this thing just hard carried against Bretonnia. Because they really can't fight it. Like, the characters get the crap kicked out of them by this thing. It's good at clearing out it's relatively good at clearing out cavalry. It kills quite a few models at a time. And the healing is just really strong. So, it takes a lot to try and kill this thing. Usually, Bretonnia tries to go for a kite build if they see a Gorgon. And they can do that, because they do have mounted yeoman archers. And peasant bowmen, but... you know, as long as you can get it into melee combat and it starts healing, it can survive, like, really weak bow fire, of that type. Because, you know, Bretonian peasant bows and the mounted yeoman don't have a ton of AP. Like, it's pretty reasonable amounts, but nothing too crazy. And, you know, people don't really go for fire arrows all that often. Really, people bring the pox arrows because they have more damage and they have poison. Their pox arrows are just outright better. And Butchers of Kalkengard, they're good against Bretonnia, but like the silver shields mean that the peasant arrows with the fire damage are really not going to be hitting them that hard. And you've just got better options for Bretonnia to, like, hammer down lightly armored monstrous infantry, like Knights of the Realm, stuff like that. People really want the pox arrows so they control the Centaur swarms from becoming too unmanageable. So, this is what the tier list looks like. Pretty solid options across the board. This is not the strongest category for the Beastmen. But all of the units here are reasonably cost-effective. They're just, like, the reason that it looks like this, and why I've got quite a few units that, like, really carry on other factions in the strong and situational columns, is just that Beastmen are cost-effective in so many other areas. You really want to fill out on cheaper stuff more often. The monsters especially, like Eyemore Sleeve, Incarnate Elemental, Jabberslythes, Gorgons, if you do bring them, they're centerpiece units, you know? Like, you're building around these tools. And they very much do shine if you build around them, but it, you know, does limit your creativity a little bit, because they are fairly expensive. But, getting them into your builds and bringing them in the right matchups is, definitely something where, you know, they immediately, like, move up, to, like, being, you know, pretty damn top tier if they're used in the right matchups, which is why I was talking about the matchups for these big single entity monsters so much, because that really is where they shine. They're not units that you can bring against every faction in the game. Usually, like, the Eye of Morsleep has more good matchups than all the others, and is arguably good against, you know, all of the top tier factions, which is why he's up here. You'll be building around him more often than all the other ones. But, like, Incarnate Elementals have matchups where they really rip and tear through stuff. Same with Jabberslythes. Gorgon's a little less so, but, I mean, Bretonnia is a pretty rough matchup for the Beastmen in a lot of ways. There's a lot of things Bretonnia does that counter what the Beastmen do really well. So the Gorgons can really shine there, because they can be just so hard to kill. And leave your Lord to go do spellcasting duties. And just offer, like, a really good anchor piece, you know. Minos are good in a lot more varied matchups, but again, Beastmen have pretty good anti-large outside of them, as well as really good infantry clear, so the dual weapons aren't that amazing. Butchers of Kalkengard are just a better Minotaur Shield. Minotaur shields you still can bring. I honestly really like the Minotaurs with shields in the Wood Elf matchup. That sounds insane. But they're honestly pretty durable there. And they're way cheaper than the Butchers. And you know, the Butchers of Kalkengard, they can do really well against the hardwood. But they also just soak up tons of missile fire, and people are usually preparing for ways of dealing with the Butchers of Kalkengard. Yeah, you gotta be really careful with these guys, but they are definitely a unit that can hard carry games for you. I mean, honestly, cockatrices are something that almost, I just haven't had enough time with them, but they're almost a core unit in my book. Just the snare is really good, man, for the Beastmen. The good combat stats with cycle charge potential is really, really juicy. There's a lot of cool things here. You just gotta find ways to, like, play around them, you know? And, you know, there's, again, Centigores, Razorgore Herd, Chariots, the Infantry, the Lords and Heroes that are all fairly well costed, Ungor Raiders. Mixing in the big monsters is a spice of life type deal, you know? You use them well, and you can really see where the versatility of the Beastmen roster comes into really sharp focus. I mean, just the fact that you've got so many, like, viable or near-viable big monsters really tells you how good the Beastmen are as a faction. Because a lot of factions, they have big monsters like this, and they're just outright bad. Like, not even usable in any matchups, really. But the Beastmen's, like, speed and versatility in all of their other tools opens up opportunities for these big monsters to be really good distractions or just absolute value monsters, like the Iamor Sleeve or the Gorgons in the right matchups. Jabberslythes, they can get their value back. They can even get wicked uptrades under the right circumstances, but they're really a distraction piece. Karna Elemental is just really solid at getting 1900 value and clearing out infantry and stuff like that. You know, again, something Beastmen can struggle with at times. Anyways. Take care, guys. I'll see y'all next time. And I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think. Very curious. And I'm going to see y'all next time. Take care. Peace.